Hi, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to Rewriting the Rules. This is episode 3, Apprenticeships, the Skills Engine. My name is Gavin. I'm the CEO and founder of FE News, and I'm joined by...
I'm Sacha Finkle from NCFE.
Hey, Sacha, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really good. So everyone, this is episode 3, but it's the final episode of our mini-series on Rewriting the Rules, which I think is the greatest title for a season ever, to be honest with you. And what a lot of change we're going through, and I think that's been the whole driver for the whole sort of season, really. And today we're looking at apprenticeships, and we've got such a lineup of guests. So I'm joined by Sacha, and we've also got Simon Ashworth from AELP, Crawford Knott from Hawk Training. Looking back on all of this, I looked at some stuff that me and Crawford recorded back in 2011. We both looked like kids, basically, back then. It was, and I think we've been knowing each other for years before then as well. I know Simon for many a year as well. So we've got a really cool show coming up. But today, what we're really thinking around is apprenticeships. And this has been a whole season in partnership with NCFE called Rewriting the Rules. It's the Future of Qualifications. And today we're going to be focusing on apprenticeships and what a lot there is to navigate around apprenticeships. And what we're looking at the moment is, where do apprenticeships fit into the wider skill system? What changes have been happening? Endpoint to productivity changes, and around what does that mean around employer-led provision? There's huge changes which are happening at the moment, and where do apprenticeships fit within it being around social mobility, productivity, and the whole skill system, of what does that sort of deliver, really? But Sacha, we've named this episode Apprenticeships, the Skills Engine. Why are apprenticeships seen as such a critical skills engine for productivity, growth, and opportunity?
Well, big question. In short, I would say because they connect education directly to the real economic needs. They help businesses build talent, help workers gain employability skills, and help economies improve productivity and social mobility at the same time. They close skills gaps. Many industries struggle to find workers with practical, job-ready abilities. Apprenticeships train people in the exact skills employers need, often in sectors facing shortages at the minute. Engineering, construction, healthcare, digital technologies are things that come to mind.
Yep.
Unlike purely classroom-based education, apprenticeships combine theory with hands-on experience, as you know, which reduces the mismatch between qualifications and workplace needs. They improve productivity. I think that's a real key thing. Workers become productive faster because they learn while doing the work. Employers can shape the training, so it links directly with current technologies. Technology is moving so rapidly, so sometimes what's happening in the classroom, by the time those students reach the workplace, that technology shifted. Apprenticeships allow them to be able to learn those current technologies and company process and changing industry standards while they're learning. Aligning the education and the labour market demand. Traditional education systems can sometimes move slowly compared to the changing industry needs, just as I've said. Apprenticeships involve employers directly in the economic transition. Thinking about the shift, AI, automation, key factors in today's labour market, apprenticeships allow that to be workers to be learning that as they're training. And then the youth unemployment is a thing that young people often face. They experience paradox where they can't get a job because they haven't got the experience. So this allows them to get the experience as they're coming into the market. So in a nutshell, the apprenticeships are seen as a critical skills engine because they sit at the intersection between education, employment, and economic development, and they help people gain opportunities while helping businesses and economies grow more effectively.
Yeah, no, definitely. I 100% agree. I'm being like looking back in the mirror a little bit on stuff. I remember Nick Bowles at AELP conference around government putting hand in hand productivity and apprenticeships. Actually, that was a very long time ago. Previous government. It's been all the way through, but there's been a few changes of recent around policy around apprenticeships. I'll be interested to see what Simon and Crawford are thinking around how that's maybe shifted a bit. And I agree. Yesterday we had ONS labour market data has come out around unemployment across the country, and NEETs is 14.7%. So like apprenticeships and that sort of the shift now around young people for apprenticeships is really key. But how has policy focus on apprenticeships evolved in recent years, particularly around quality standards, outcomes? Mentioned a couple of the focuses there. What have you sort of seen from an awarding organisation and a social mobility charity on those sort of policy changes?
Yeah, well, the latest apprenticeship reforms are significant. There's no question in that. It's interesting because we've spent the last decade working with employers, providers and apprentices to help them understand the benefits of independent endpoint assessment, which, as you know, was developed following the Richards Review in 2012, and it's been a key part of the apprenticeship assessment. Since its introduction, there's no doubt been a shift in perception, and apprenticeships have become more valued and their profile has increased. Current policy decisions are now leaning away from endpoint assessment in some cases, and considerations are being made to return back to centre-assessed approach, which I personally think is a positive move. If you recall, in 2020, Ofqual introduced the Centre Assessment Standard Scrutiny, or the CAS strategy, and this was to support the improvement in controls awarding organisations have over centres and the perceived risk that there was of the quality over centre assessment. So we've shifted and we've now formalised those controls, and centre assessment is aligned to Ofqual's conditions, which allows us to improve accountability and trust. You could question whether the introduction of endpoint assessment and the introduction of the CAS strategy is actually addressing the same problem, but in two different ways.
Yeah.
So now's a really good time for us to look at these together. And the current apprenticeship system, teeth in, with the defined endpoint assessment is costly, it's complex, and in many cases can have a negative impact on timely achievement, especially when you have apprentices that are waiting for endpoint assessment. So considering the CAS strategy and considering what we've learned from endpoint assessment, looking at those together now and trying to simplify and create more programs that are targeting all of the things that I spoke about the economy and the changes to the workforce that we've got at the minute and the requirements of industry. I think ensuring that apprenticeships are employer relevant, economically valuable, but also maintain the rigour and quality that we've got from the CAS strategy and we've learned from apprenticeship system and endpoint assessment, and simplifying it is absolutely what we should be doing. And I'm very hopeful that this reform and how it's been implemented will address that, although I think there is still some challenges that we need to iron out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, definitely. And there's so much change happening all at once as well, if you know what I mean, which I know we're going to probably cover in a bit. So should I bring in Simon and Crawford? So our guest today, top guest lineup, and everyone, we're live. It's currently 10:09. So if you've got any questions, we'll do our very best to answer those. But I'm going to bring Simon Ashworth from AELP into the studio. Hey, Simon. And also going to bring in Crawford Knott from Hawk Training. Hey, Crawford. Hey, Simon. How are you?
Hi, Gavin.
So thanks so much for joining us today. Kicking off, we've covered a little bit around, there's so much happening at the moment, but one debate that keeps sort of going around, and I want one sort of unpicking it a little bit, is around the quality versus quantity debate. What do we really mean when we're talking about that? And what does quality really mean around apprenticeships, Simon?
Well, Gavin, that's a really good question, isn't it, this sort of debate? And I find it quite frustrating because I think actually in terms of quality, we're in a really strong position as a sector. Some key stats for you on that, 93% of apprentices are studying at a good or outstanding training provider. Qualification achievement rates, 65%, they've grown significantly over the last few years. So I think kind of the quality debates over the last few years has been replaced, I think, very much around affordability, and thinking about that shift from the Department for Education to the Department for Work and Pensions. Obviously, a big debate at the moment around who apprenticeships are for. Obviously, the government wants to do more on young people. And I think there's also a debate about what does success look like? Because we know qualification achievement rates for young people tend to be a bit lower. But actually, if in this new world around DWP, apprenticeships are a vehicle to get more young people out of being neat and being more active and potentially into a different destination. And I think we need a wider lens. So I don't think quality is really the issue. For me, it's about affordability and what the systems, who the system's for, and what kind of broader success looks like in the DWP space rather than the DFE space.
Yeah, it's very significant point there around the shift from DFE to DWP and where it's sort of sitting, or something I want to ask you about later about that. But Crawford, anything you want to add to what Simon said there?
No, I think I'd agree with Simon. I mean, I've been involved with Hawk training for 25 years now, and I've seen a lot of changes with apprenticeships over the years. And I think we are in a good place in terms of the whole quality piece, definitely. And obviously independent assessment, endpoint assessment is a big part of that. If I compare the programme that we currently have with standards, to frameworks, it's very different. It's far more rigorous. And I think it really does deliver quality outcomes for the learners. And as Sacha touched on earlier as well, employers and society at large, really. And I think the point you also made, Sacha, just in the introduction around sort of formal education, an example, my daughter taking her options 2 years ago they were almost identical to sort of like the choices of subjects that I'd seen 35 years previously, and you sort of think, and there's, wider questions around the education system, the rest of it. How are we moving on at the pace that we should be with all the changes you touched on around technology with the education system? And apprenticeships really do move with the times to a greater degree, I feel, compared to sort of our, compulsory education sort of system as well. So I think we're in a good place quality wise. The quantity one, I think, as Simon's touched on, it depends very much, what obviously government's objectives with this are, and there has definitely been a shift with the move from skills and apprenticeships moving over to DWP as well. So I think what we do need is a lot of consultation with the sector. As you no doubt know, over 70% of apprenticeships delivered by the independent training providers. We are the interface with employers, learners and society at large. And if we're empowered and consulted with, we can do so much more to help achieve the objectives that the government's setting as well, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Simon made a really good point around who are apprenticeships aimed at and for policy-wise at the moment as well, because we did have an all-age, all-level system that was very much employer-led, which I know we're going to probably touch on in a bit, but things have shifted, haven't they? And it's going towards much more around young people route, which is totally get the thought behind it, particularly when you look at numbers, which is literally out yesterday. It's 1 in 7 young people 16 to 24 looking for work, but it's just matching those. It's the quantity number comes in there, doesn't it? Around how do we deliver on that for employers as well? But anyway, so much to this. We could talk about that for about 5 years, to be honest with you. But Sacha, I know you got a bunch you want to talk about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would be interested what changes, if any, are needed to the apprenticeship assessments to ensure that it's rigorous, fair and proportionate. Crawford, what's your thoughts on that?
I'd say, being frank, Sacha, I mean, obviously we've been working now with endpoint assessment for almost, it's almost 10 years, isn't it now, since the reforms. And as I say, I think the system has become more rigorous. I'll be frank with you, we've had some really good experiences of EPA, but also some very negative ones. I think we're in a good place. And obviously, when I think back to when we, started out delivering standards, we were starting people on programs, but we didn't actually know what the endpoint assessment was going to look like. So we've come a long way since then. On the negative end of the scale, occasionally it's been feeling like we've effectively been doing the job of the EPAO or the AO without actually getting the funding for it, and sort of wondering what are we paying for. But I think, as I say, over the years, the whole system's evolved. Those relationships have got stronger. I think you touched on it earlier, Sacha. One of the issues has been backlogs of endpoint assessments and learners not being able to complete as timely as they would like. Then there's also obviously implications for providers if that learner then withdraws. So we're taking the hit. And also, obviously, where you've got, in some cases, a professional qualification learners are actually more set on getting that professional qualification. I've seen this before in sort of that finance sector, and then aren't so keen to sort of then progress on to do the EPA. So we're sort of having to almost like drag them along in terms of the ITP sector. I think really what we also need is the clarity. As providers, we're being asked to do more. We can do that. You know, we're an established provider. We've got those quality measures in place, but we do need the clarity from really government in terms of, you know, what that looks like. Because again, you know, we're interfacing with employers and learners. I've no doubt you are, and those sorts of questions are being asked of us really. So, you know, we can do it, but also again, we can't do it for free. So it'd be also interesting to see what that funding looks like as well.
Yeah,
because there's a lot providers already do in terms of administration of all manner of things, from, you know, employer incentives to obviously managing the whole EPA process, you know, together with AOs. But yeah, we need clarity as well as to what that's going to look like.
Is there anything that you want to add to that, Simon?
I think you set out at the start very positive, Sacha, around the benefits of assessment reform. I know certainly some of the others in the assessment community are quite nervous and been quite vocal. I mean, obviously, I talk to a lot of training providers, and I'd say the consensus is broadly that some of the changes around assessment are welcome, but recognising that there are some providers who are well positioned to take advantage of the new system and make it work, whilst there are others who have never done on-programme assessment before, and you know, very much sort of see assessment something that kind of comes at the end. So I certainly see a bit of a different view in terms of the provider view of what we might end up with some of the concerns of the assessment community. Kind of really sort of emphasising what Crawford said. I mean, I think we always had some challenges about the scalability of endpoint assessment when the system really kind of got going. You know, some of those things like on-programme observations. I think the independence that endpoint assessment's brought has been really important, and that is a really kind of key principle. So I think broadly the principles that the department set out last February are sensible. You know, where appropriate, providers can do some of the on-programme assessment where appropriate. Assessment can take place on programme and maybe de-risk that the bit at the end. I mean, again, you know, key stats for you. I think it's about 91% of apprentices who get to the end pass endpoint assessment first time. And I think when you factor in retakes, then that goes up to about 96%. And there have been some questions about is EPA rigorous enough? I have a different focus on that. You know, I'd say that providers do a fantastic job to prepare learners effectively for endpoint assessment. If anything, I think EPA might be too rigorous. You know, I always use that analogy of if you're learning to drive, you know, you spend 9 months learning to drive, you do an hour's multiple choice and a 90-minute practical. So I think there are some challenges with some of the shape and size of some of the assessment plans. As you were saying yourself, probably a bit too long, too expensive to deliver. But as the chief regulator said at our conference last year, I think it's important we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater around some of the benefits of assessment. So a really interesting point, isn't it, where now the challenge comes with, I think assessment plans are going to come out thick and fast, and we're in that sort of transition period. So I think this is the biggest change since 2017, and you know, as providers, we'll be delivering 99% will be delivering apprenticeship, full fat apprenticeships rather than short courses. Getting this right, having the right people, the right systems, thinking about cash flow and kind of payments would be the thing I'd be really focused on if I was a provider. But yeah, potentially I think this is good evolution, but we'll see where we are in a year's time, I think, with you know, with the final sort of set of assessment plans and how they sort of landed.
Really good point there, Simon. What it leads to the next thing really around this whole series called Rewriting the Rules, and we're looking at there's a lot of change happening. So where would you say apprenticeships are currently sitting and integrated into other technical and vocational routes, and where are the gaps? Because there's been so much change. I mean, this morning alone, there's been 2 new qualifications announced, you know, occupational foundation certificates. You can take a holiday and all of a sudden there's like a whole new suite of stuff going on. Do you know what I mean? So there's more clarification on T levels, more clarification on V levels. Goodness, if you was on like maternity leave, or I don't know, you were so lucky to have a sabbatical or something, you come back and be like, what on earth is this? So I think, where do apprenticeships sit in the wider technical and vocational routes, and where are the gaps? Crawford.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the apprenticeship brand is something that's centuries and centuries old. It's something that people understand. It's a job with training, effectively. There's a lot of tinkering and confusion, I think, that's created by some of these changes. Just what you've covered there. We now have foundation apprenticeships. We've got V levels. We've got T levels. Good luck to parents trying to sort of navigate this, and young people as well, looking to sort of get their career on the first rung, the ladder on, the foot on the first rung of the career ladder. I think really it needs to be very joined up. I think again, it goes back to that collaboration, and sometimes I think perhaps change is being made in silos and without perhaps cognizance of the wider unintended consequences. How does that all map in? How does the V level then map into, say, if someone then progresses on to do apprenticeship after doing the V levels and T levels, etc. And I think there's a huge piece around that as well. I think it also goes back to consultation just on sort of like the foundation apprenticeships. There's been very limited take up in the construction sector, and effectively what was done, it was developed in a silo by government, then presented to the sector, and they kind of, it's not what we really want anyway, and that's no disrespect to anyone on those programs, but I think a greater degree of consultation and planning would help us to really, I think, meld a lot of these different components together and ensure that we've got a system that people can understand. But changing the deck chairs every sort of 5 minutes or every few years is just going to add to that malaise and that confusion. That's my worry.
Yeah, no, definitely. Simon, what would you sort of say around apprenticeships and the wider system, and if there's any gaps?
Yeah, this is sort of never-ending challenge, isn't it? I think before Labour got in, they talked about having a piecemeal skill system, and I still think there are some gaps. So we talk about apprenticeships being a vehicle to tackle or help with the NEET challenge, and there's a big gap between being NEET and doing a level 2 apprenticeship or a foundation apprenticeship. So yes, we've got study programs, but we're definitely missing that sort of traineeship type program or pre-employment course. We'll see what kind of comes through the youth guarantee. I think that's a good opportunity. So I think there's a bit of a gap at the bottom of the ladder. A couple of other thoughts from me on this one is, we've seen some issues with T levels around being able to progress from a level 3 T level into a level 3 apprenticeship because of RPL. And potentially not being able to progress into a level 4 apprenticeship because you've got not got enough on-the-job experience. So there are some areas around interchangeability with T levels, and I hope that doesn't become a feature of some of the V levels as well. So how sort of V levels, T levels dock into apprenticeships, I think is really important. And the other thing we're not talked about today, I'd say, is where do HTQs fit in? The last government, the current government, talk about the importance of missing skills, the missing middle at level 4, level 5. We've seen some level 4 programs defunded as part of the streamlining. How do apprenticeships sort of link with HTQs? HTQs kind of aligned more with the lifelong learning entitlement space. So there seems to be a bit of a disjoin, and for me around getting started, portability between V levels, T levels, and possibly V levels. We'll see what happens on that. But where do HTQs, which were really kind of popular in government thinking, kind of fit alongside apprenticeship and apprenticeship routes? Bit of a ongoing agenda for me on that one.
Yeah, and like the whole missing middle has been I've been doing FE News for nearly 23 years. I think I've heard of missing middle all the way through that time. It still needs to be addressed, if you know what I mean. But really good points about V levels actually, and that progression. Where does that all fit? Yeah, no, really cool. Sacha, I know you got a bunch you want to say as well.
Yeah. What would a more generally employer-led apprenticeship system look like in practice, and in your mind, Simon?
That's a really good question, isn't it? Because the narrative of the last government was, we've got an employer-led system, standards designed by employers being given the money and being able to sort of choose who they spend it on. And it feels like we've had a bit of a move away from that, haven't we? Some of that's been quite subtle, employer-led to pro-employer. I think the big challenge for me is where small employers sort of fit in the system, and I guess we've got an opportunity coming up with some of the regional brokerage pilots that we'll probably see a bit more on in the autumn. For me, the challenges for SMEs is about awareness, opportunity, 700 apprenticeships, 1,200 providers. Where do we start? access to the system. You know, a lot of them are time poor. They need some support with that, and aggregating up demand for small employers. So, for me, I think there's a lot more that could be done to help certainly smaller employers get involved in apprenticeships. And I guess just a soundbite to larger employers who I kind of use this sort of description that they're a bit punch drunk at the moment, because they were told, as Gavin talked about earlier, all age, all level. Do what you want, where you want, to some extent, and now they're getting told you can't have level 7 adults, you can't have leadership management. You know, we've got some big changes coming in the autumn around how long you've got to spend your levy, how much you've got, and then the kind of cost of doing that. So I think Skills England could probably be a bit more clearer on their communications. You know, we've gone from sort of trailblazers, groups of persons, expert panels, expert networks. So I think the government could be a bit more clearer around how employers fit in. But certainly employers are getting pushed out a little bit, I think, and certainly sector representative groups are being seen as the kind of vehicle to hold the views of employers, certainly in engagement in development of some of the programs. So big change, but I'd certainly like to see sort of smaller employers, you know, being able to access the system and being supported a bit more. So we've got a more inclusive approach to apprenticeships for all employers of all sizes.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Crawford, is there anything that you want to add to that?
No, I think I'd agree. I think, you know, I've heard employers saying at the moment, with a lot of the changes that have gone through, they felt that it's being done to them. You know, that they've been engaged in the whole process before with trailblazers, etc., and having much more of a free rein to decide, you know, in the case of large employers, where they want to spend their levy. And, you know, some of the changes as well, are they going to really have the intended impact the government wants? So defunding management apprenticeships, is that going to then make a load of NEETs take up apprenticeships? I'd argue that's not the case. And also, you know, when a young person enters the workplace, they are mentored and, you know, managed by a more senior professional, and shouldn't that person also have the wherewithal and the skills to support that process? I'd argue that, yeah, that's vital in all of this. I think also, to Simon's point, just around smaller employers as well, I mean, we see it time and time again. A lot of employers, you know, those SMEs do struggle to engage with the system. Even something as relatively simple as setting up, you know, an AS account, an online account, well, through which obviously, you know, funds can flow and so on. We have to, in many cases, you know, we're holding the hand every step of the way, and that's again something that, you know, we do as providers. But you know, due to perhaps some of the reforms back in the day, we've certainly seen less of an uptake from SMEs, just because when you look at everything else they're dealing with, whether it's, you know, hikes in national insurance contributions, whether it's obviously cost of raw materials, their Employment Rights Act, all of these things that they're juggling with, they want to engage with apprenticeships. They really, you know, embrace the concept, but the practicality is that for SMEs, there's so much stuff, you know, that's sort of gone to the top of their in tray, that engagement with the system is too cumbersome, really, for them to perhaps do what they want to do.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. I think it needs to be easier for particularly SMEs to be able to navigate the system. You know, and like Simon said, people are time poor. You know, it's really difficult. We're out of time. If you was to be able to see, you could do one change that you want to see to apprenticeships to be able to make it so as it can deliver everything we hope and believe it can, what would it be, Simon?
Oh, we've had so much policy churn, haven't we, Gavin? You know, we've gone from mission-led, laser focus on industrial strategy, and it's all like neat now. And apprenticeship shouldn't just be about neat. If I had a magic wand and had a chance to make a change, I mean, we need more investment, don't we, in apprenticeships? And you know, we suspect that certainly over the next 2 years, you know, there could be as much as £1.5 billion held back from the Treasury that's as a top slice that could go into apprenticeships. And you know, we mustn't forget that 80% of the 2040 workforce is already employed. So, you know, apprenticeship shouldn't just be about neat and young people. They should also focus on adult retraining and upskilling. So if we got that investment into the system, which employers are paying for apprenticeships, then we wouldn't have to kind of make some of the trade-offs we're seeing at the moment. And I think that would help nullify and satisfy some of the employed and some of the concerns they've got. So for me, it's release the top slice. And let's have a all age, all level apprenticeship system. That'd be my key ask, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, no, cool. Crawford, what would you want to see?
Yeah, I completely agree with Simon on the top slice and so on investment. But again, going back to, I think a word I said a number of times today is consultation, consult the sector. You know, we're in it to help change people's lives. We do need to make a profit to be able to reinvest, you know, and have the impact that we all want to see on, obviously, the economy, to deliver measurable outcomes for employers and also society at large, really. So consult with us, you know, involve us in that sort of pathway to the future, really.
Yeah, no, cool. Sacha, what would you want to see?
I would like to see really clear and effective assessment plans and assessment methods to provide that opportunity for apprentices to succeed, and that are proportionate and appropriate. That's what I would like to see.
No, cool. We're completely out of time. I've gone over, actually. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really cool. We could be discussing this for hours and hours and hours. So Simon, Crawford, thank you. Sacha, really cool session today. And this is the last episode of Rewriting the Rules. But we've got a new season. There's a mini season again, Learning for a Changing World. Starting 11th of June. It's with NCFE again. And it leads actually from now, talking about apprenticeships and NEETs, about the missing million. And it's just after our Breaking Barriers NEETs collective as well. So that's going to be really interesting to see the outcome of that. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really interesting show today. We'll see you on 11th of June. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.